All right, we are live. Hello, YouTube. Welcome to the channel formerly known as Spacepan, now known as The Antisocial Contract. I made a video about it if you're curious what the name means, but that's not what we're talking about right now because I got JWille here, and we decided we're going to appropriate intersectionality for the anti-feminists, for the men's rights movement, because fuck it. We're entitled to, we can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. I know that intersectionality is kind of a bad term in a lot of manosphere spaces, but there is space to reclaim it. If we really look at this, there are ways we can apply this. The major issue with it that I find, right, is that intersectionality means, oh, blackness and femaleness, and then you say, how about blackness and maleness, and they say no, right? And they'll
And
have
then
a lot of
look at
words.
Emmett Till.
Yeah, they have all kinds of words to explain why this is the case. But I'm here to tell you, cut right through the nonsense. These people are cunts. All right. So this is GAYTRIARCHY 2025. We're doing it. We're doing it, people. I was gonna make a video to introduce kind of this next return of my channel, but it's exporting. So we kind of stumbling across that finish line there. But hey, I'm not promising consistency. I am suggesting it in the future, and we're going to see how well we fill in those steps. And hey, shout out to Paul in the comment section there.
Oh, we have a comment? That's cool.
This is exactly what I was aiming
nice.
for. It's good topic. Never even thought about it this way. Exactly.
Oh,
right?
God, he's awesome. No, he's
but it's so obvious, right? It's been right there. What have we been doing? We've been sitting on gold. So JWille, Drew, he has a number of ideas about this, a number of topics. This was something that he brought up to me, and had a number of specific ideas about it, and about applying it in a little bit of a more detailed and nuanced way than you usually get in the intersectionality third wave to, I guess, 2.5 wave, wherever you want to draw that line, that wave of feminism. You don't really get that nuance much more than Black women are double oppressed.
And they don't they basically this is like a critique of that because whenever they do that, they never really seem to talk about ways that Black women in particular are facing. They used to talk about Black issues and female issues, and then completely ignore that many of the Black issues is way more of a male issue than a female one. Like, they can lift so many Tamir Rice, but very few Breonna Taylor, for example. So it's not like, it's a very dishonest thing. They basically, you set up axioms, then mandate people follow it, which is bullshit. But
yeah, broadly what they're doing, right, is they're like, okay, well, I have this pile of oppression here and this pile of oppression here. Oh, well, if you're both things, we can just add them, right? And
yeah, no, that doesn't work. That doesn't really work.
Sometimes that might actually make sense and be appropriate, but it totally depends on what you're specifically talking about. But of course, I won't say that there aren't people who are realizing, yes, some of these are going to be synergistically unique, right? I think we can give them a little bit of credit for maybe some of them, in the more robust and starting to kind of realize that and apply those principles for sure. But yeah, certainly in terms of coffee shop feminism in the popular vernacular, it kind of remains to be seen.
I do believe that this used framework is that I'm proposing is actually more going to be palatable to some of the coffee shop feminists, I would call them, because it has worked in the past. But yeah, we just have to but then I have to want to go over and explain the nuances, because intersectionality by itself is not a term unique to feminism as an ideology, because intersectional feminism is just an adjective. It is an adjective of feminism, right? Which means that intersectionality exists independent of feminism. Thus, one needs to apply intersectionality as an adjective to any other, and nobody owns the English language. And intersectionality as a concept, as a term, as a framework applies to any advocacy for any group, not just women. Doesn't mean it doesn't apply to women, but it also applies to men. Thus, my framework is, and what we are doing here, specifically looking at men as the base, and then looking at the diversity of men, and then see where there are intersections that could affect a group or individuals based on their identities. Thus, I have 3 different types of intersections that does exist that you can very easily distinguish, and that is that they are called piling intersections, um, unique intersections, and magnifying intersections. And usually when people talk about it, they talk about piling intersections because that's simple, and that is the most simple one, so I will go over that one first. Basically, like, if you have one trait, biological trait, immutable trait characteristics, like your sex, right, that is, you're going to be affected by certain things because of your sex, and also being more likely affected by certain things because of your sex, right? But then if you look to like other things such as your ethnicity, for example, or your age, or your sexuality, or like whatever you can imagine, right? That still is identifiable. You can say that, and you can take things that you are affected by as an individual based on those things, and things that are affected by you because of your sex. Thus, um, if you just pile them up, the issues, right? That is piling intersections. You have some issues because of your sex, or some for your class, age, disability, ethnicity, even height, or first language, um, whatever you can like imagine, sexual orientation. Um, and then you just pile them up. That's piling intersection, right? You look at the issues, for different groups, and whatever groups you have, you just pile up all those problems, and or likelihood of you facing those problems. That's piling intersection. Very simple, but that's not the main appeal of intersectional issues. The bigger appeal is looking at magnifying intersections, which is a bit different, and that is that you take an issue that affects people, right? It might be an issue that affects one group of people, or that affects groups of people in different ways, to different intensities. An issue affects one sex, right? And then you can see that some members of that sex, one issue accept one sex more than the other, right? And then you can see that some people of that sex, of different types of identities, let's say ethnicity, as an example, do face that sex-based problem more intensely, or more likely, or more often because of their ethnicity. And the same thing goes for other types of aspects of your identity, such as your disability or class, for example. And that is because I'm magnifying. You're taking a problem through the lens of your sex, which makes it worse. And then you take another example like your sexuality, and then it becomes magnified. Then you have a harder issue than the people, not really harder, but a different way. Sometimes even harder than people of a different type of sexuality that are your sex, but also different from people of another sex, that who shares your identity that is magnifying. That identity is magnifying your sex-based issue, or your sex is magnifying your race-based issue, or any other issue. That's a magnifying intersection, right? The third intersection, that would be unique intersections. And that is that you have a problem that doesn't exist for a group as a whole, right? So that might be an issue that doesn't exist for a sex of people, it doesn't exist for all men or all women, right? But it only exists for men of specific other identities. Like, it might only affect men of certain ethnic groups, and it might only affect men of some disabilities, or men of some sexual orientations, or any other identity you might think of. Um, and that is if you don't look at the intersection, if you don't look at the sex and the other identities simultaneously, then you won't actually notice the unique issues, because you can't take a men's issue. You can say that, but because it doesn't affect all men or most men, it doesn't affect them just because they're men. It affects them because they are men of a different type, because they're a specific type of men. But it does affect them because they are men, but not just because they are men, right? So it's a man's issue, but it can go unnoticed because it's uniquely intersectional. Another way where you call it unique intersectional issues. Um,
Right.
so
So then just to kind of recap some of these, like with piling, I imagine that's kind of the simplest, dumbest one. And in particular, you'd have, I guess, usually like a shared common denominator, right? You'd have some sort of a thing that just tends to affect each group more. So then you can just kind of logically deduce, well, yeah, if you're part of both groups, you're kind of getting a double whammy there, right? The
Yeah, and
degree to
sometimes
which maybe there's diminishing returns, right? Like we're not just strictly adding them because there's maybe redundancies there, is maybe more of the nuance. But then, of course, would you have like, the more unique issues, like we're not just disembodied immutable characteristics, right? Wandering around, right? Where like where if you just address each piece of it individually, then you say, okay, well, we did each of the things. It's like, no, right? Like if you have a gay men's issues, right? It's like, okay,
yeah,
well, here's the gay group for all of the gay people, regardless of your sex, and then here's the men's group, regardless of if you're gay or not. And it's like, you might kind of between the two, kind of jump between, kind of, magpie something together a little bit, but it's absolutely not the same as like a person as all of these things, which they are always simultaneously at the same time. Like you gotta like there's no addressing individuals if you're not also acknowledging that intersectionality just is an like indispensably useful model for you know acknowledging
yeah.
that fact, right?
Yeah, right. Because the uniqueness is that you need to look at the sex and the sexual orientation in this example in order to see the whole picture. Otherwise, you're only looking with one eye at a time, and then you're going to be a very bad driver.
Yeah, I think that's a
You're not
pretty
going
good
to get where
simple
you
way of
want.
looking at it.
And also, but the magnifying is also interesting because then you have an issue that affects one group, like let's say men, for example, but it just affects some types of men way more intensely than it affects men in general.
I would say the best category of these, the one that I can think of that comes to my mind most, and of course this is relevant to a video that I will be uploading later today, is lookism. Because you have like lookism is a men's issue. Just we can fight about it, but it absolutely is. That's if you're in this channel, that's kind of the space you're in. We think lookism is real. We have compassion for incels and the black pill. They are men and boys, and they do need help and support, and they shouldn't be demonized, and they need to be defended against these evil fucking shrieking harpy bitches who want to just bully them because they're an easy target. But of course, like if you're gay, a lot of that's neutralized because gay men, if you're interested in men, you're interested in them, right? We don't have so many of these cultural and social perverse incentives just packed into that sexual dynamic in the same way that heterosexual couples do. And because of that, I mean, that's part of the explanation, I suppose, as to why women are incredibly entitled and ridiculous and choosy, right? They don't date their looks match. They date a man who's much better looking than them in general is the dynamic, right? They have much higher standards and their standards are completely unchecked and totally fucking ridiculous. So that's only going to cut towards straight men, right? That's a clear magnifying issue. That's an intersection between heterosexuality and maleness, right? And that's
Yeah.
why like gay cells aren't real, fem cells aren't real, right? There may be space to kind of use those terms and play with them, but in terms of setting it up as though it's like a foil or a part of understanding and seldom, like that is absolutely bullshit and completely fucking inappropriate. So I'll hold a hard line there. But yeah, to me, that's like the absolute best example
No,
of
that is
a
a good
magnifying issue
example.
is in seldom for sure.
Because if you're gay, you don't really have the problem getting sex because you can get sex whenever you want, right? The
Yeah,
problem
because
you
we
have if you're
don't, we don't really care if a guy's like bald or kind of short or whatever. That's
well,
that's
it's different. Like some
you're into
guys
men,
actually,
you're into it. It's
but we still like have our preferences. But we our preferences. Like the funny thing is that we tend to not have preferences based on society because we're not women. We tend to have preferences based on like just how we genuinely feel. Um, so if you like, to me, I actually like do find guys that are bold, for example, to usually be rather attractive because I don't know, I just think it's just look manly. But I also like prefer guys that are about my height, and I'm pretty tall. So I don't like when guys are too much taller or too shorter either. But the thing is, it's gonna be another guy who likes that, right? If you just want sex, like you can still always get the sex. You might not get sex with whoever you want, like. but you're still gonna get it if you want it. Just like with women, they can have sex with a guy if they want to, but they can't just have sex with any guy. It's the same if you're gay. Like we always can get sex if we want to. So basically, the problem that we have is that we don't might not want sex without a relationship, and then that can actually be hard if you're gay compared to if you're straight, actually. And that's also why it's important.
Yeah, now I wonder if that kind of falls more into the realm of a quote unquote unique issue.
Yes, that is unique because most men can't relate to the fact that you say that a lot of guys just want to fuck me and I just want a relationship, right? That's actually something more women say than men say. But if you're gay, then you can actually absolutely feel that. And many gay
Tired of
men
all
do
these
feel
women just treating me like a piece of meat.
right. It's rare for guys to be
orgasms I
there.
didn't ask for.
Like very
Not
hot
to
guys.
say that's
are
totally not a thing, but broadly speaking, yeah, you see that it's
rare, very rare. But it's more common if you're gay. So.
I mean, it's probably more common than we think it is. I think there's space for consciousness raising there, but I think that more gets into the territory of like statutory rape.
Yeah, but it's also that like men, for example, men are just told that all we want is sex, which is false. So therefore, you say, how can a man like be complaining that he just gets sex because he isn't a fucking slut, I guess. Like, I don't know. Like, it's just society being extremely misandric, right? Which we both agree on. But the topic isn't just misandry in general, it's specifically how misandry is affected by other aspects of your biology, which it is quite often, actually. Thus, one really have to, how do I say it? Look at these intersections. And we do have kind of like a list of intersections that we can go over. Should I start with the first list?
Yeah, let me grab that so I can start following along here. I was like, oh yeah, I should post the link in different places, and I was like, this is all dead. I got nowhere to signal boost really.
Yeah, like this is like something that isn't very covered in mainstream academia, which is unfortunate because there's so much ground to be covered. So I do have many like men's issues that are intersectional that I will go over now. So I can start with the
Yeah,
first
I mean,
one.
right at the top of the list, we got false accusations, right?
Right, and
Your
that
argument is this is going to be, let's see, you say black men disproportionately exonerated. So you're probably referring to, oh goodness, what do we call it again? The DNA project.
I think it's called like the Innocent Project.
Yes, the Innocence Project. Wow, I can't believe that escaped me for a moment. Yeah, like definitely. I think that's like it makes sense that that's what you would find, right? And it suggests that it's been like relatively overzealously persecuted, at least in terms of counterparts of the same race and certainly counterparts of a different sex.
Yeah, because we do know that the false accusations is a men's issue overall, and the fact that there is a racial disparity in exonerations, it is a proof that there is a intersectional men's issue, because either it is that black men get more exonerated than men of other races, even though they equally falsely accused, or it's a problem that just more black men are falsely accused. So there is still a racial element to this sexist issue, which makes it a intersectional men's issue. I would say that this issue is magnifying because it is a men's rights issue overall, but it also becomes intersectional because there is a racial element to it. Like one of the most famous cases would be Emmett Till. That's pretty old, but remember that guy who was hanged by a false
When you say that
accusation?
guy, I think he was 12 years old, right? And
Yeah,
yeah,
but that's a
everybody
little guy.
point to that. It's like it's their go-to for, oh, look at white supremacy, and it's like that was female supremacy is what that was, right?
Yeah, but it was both racist
It is
and
both. It is
sexist,
both, of
right?
course.
And that's why it's so important to say that this like that's the most famous case, but like it's not the only case for hundreds of years. Like it's definitely happened afterwards. Like we also know that like uh that even like some men might be disproportionately in a specific environment where that can happen. Like if you go to college, for example, you're more likely to be falsely accused by a woman than you are in most other spaces in America.
Yeah, we all remember Mattress Girl.
Yes, we do. Uh, and therefore, if you're Asian, then you're more likely to go to college and more likely to be falsely accused if you're a guy.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I wonder if there's mitigating factors there, because that also goes into a factor of inceldom, which is for whatever reason, women just don't select Asian men, which, like, if you look at straight men, like, Asian women are, like, generally, like, right neck and neck with white women, or maybe beating them out slightly, right? And obviously you're controlling for people of, like, generally comparative attractive levels. But yeah, then there's this weird thing where it's like gay men like Asian men, women don't really like Asian men. And then the ones that they do, you know, it's the Donald Glover effect, right? Or, you know, Becky's sitting there like, I'm not racist. I like black guys too. I think Donald Glover,
like Asian,
right? It's like you chose like the whitest looking, like light skinned, just like the most like spiritually and conceptually white black man you could have chosen.
Yeah, probably. No, that's absolutely what's going
right,
on.
It's there. The same thing with like I like Asian guys, and they'll show like, it's like, yeah, but look at this Asian guy's features. It's like very like classically like European looking in ways, right? Like
yeah, when you say Asian, we can't mean Middle Eastern, because Middle Eastern is usually more classified as white than Asian.
Yeah, it kind of deserves to be its own category, you know.
Oh, we're getting into that soon.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to get on too much of a tangent there. But yeah, I mean, that is an interesting one. Is being falsely accused, like, I guess, magnifying for Asian men due to the factor of them being more likely to be like accepted into colleges? I'm not sure I really buy that.
I mean, like, I think that just because
I think it's a little bit of a stretch, but for the sake of an argument, I'd appreciate it.
It's basically like not like set in stone. I'm just saying that, like, because you are more likely to be falsely accused as a guy when you go to college, and Asian men are more likely to go to college, then they are more likely to be in an environment where things like that happens. Even though that's generally a good environment to be in,
right?
It's still a problem that you have in a good environment. Like, just because your environment is good in general doesn't mean that it has unique problems. And if you're more likely to be in that environment, even though that's a good environment to be in, then it ceases to be a good environment if you get kicked out for false accusations. And I think the same can be said about Jewish men, also more likely to go to college too.
I mean, I guess part of it though is with false accusations. Obviously, this isn't always the case. You know, we all know about, you know, the women who lied about rape to try to get out of a cab fare, and shit like that. But typically, the opportunity for false accusations is, you know, a buyer's remorse situation where some kind of sex did occur, right? And of course, the physical evidence from a consensual sexual act versus a non-consensual one, well, there's a huge amount of overlap there, right? You know, or as Karen had put it, like, this is an activity that people are consensually doing in private behind closed doors, like all around you at all times, right? The nature of it being something that's difficult to prove one way or another is just, you can't really avoid that, right? So I wonder then if part of it is like, if we're going to say false accusations are an increased factor just by virtue of being accepted into a college, I think that's a little thin. Now, if you control for the ones who are then getting access, capital A access, as the incels call it,
yeah,
then you've opened yourself up to that vulnerability where, you know, she can just decide without any real repercussion, certainly not serious enough repercussion, you know, to just make up a false accusation and, you know, let it get out of control, you know.
Like, this is an issue that affects, like, that does affect men of different races, like, in different ways, because, like, I said, it's more black men being exonerated by the Innocent Project. So that's a one example of where they are, like, affected. You know, but it's also, like, I think it's a case can be made for it to affect white men in a way too, disproportionately in a way. because if you basically like are a woman who's white, for example, or a woman who's black, for example, right? Any race actually, and you falsely accuse a man of color of rape, versus accusing a white man of rape, you're gonna get way more sympathy if you accuse a white man.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and that's of course the Brock Turner effect.
Yeah,
Like
because
anyone
like
who's read that Jane Doe letter knows that that bitch is full of shit. Like it stuns me that people like still try to cite that example of the what do they call it, affluenza or whatever. Like affluenza's maybe out there, but like Brock Turner, your princess is in another castle. Sorry,
yeah, like
he was
that's
wrong
kind of
though.
like, because like you can't accuse a man of color, especially if you're white, like of these. You can probably do it, but like, and then he's probably gonna go to jail and have his life ruined, like we see with proportionately black men being channeled by the Innocent Project. That's for crimes overall. So that is an intersectional men's issue by itself. Crime in general being a false accused, but it's actually not just falsely accused of rape; he's falsely accused, period, and be sent to jail falsely. But when it comes to sexual violence, if you accuse a man, regardless of his race, he's going to get the shit, right? But the media is going to run with it way more if it's a white guy. And this is like just like and that means it's a more bigger incentive for a woman to falsely accuse a white man of like sexual crime, which is something that one needs to actually like look into, and that is the reason why we need to talk about this as being a intersectional men's issue that we have to address, because this is a
Well,
problem.
let's see. You also have listed on here. Well, this kind of
Oh, I have,
ties it, right?
yeah, it's the next one.
The acceptance of derogatory language in media.
Yeah, that is like, when it comes to the media, there's a huge message, and that is that it's that like it's that men, it's way easy to speak, or accepted really, to speak extremely poorly of men in the media, for example. Like, you can say men are bad, fuck men are in shit. Like, you can say so much bad thing about men um, in um, in the media, in the mainstream media, and people just accept that. If you say that thing about any other race, it's considered to be racist and all offensive and whatever, which it is. But like, when you say the white man is like, no, you can't say that. Then you can say everything about white men how much you want, right? Or about men in general, right? And you can say the same thing about white people in general, how much you want, like really poorly, right? But so therefore, if a white man in particular, you can say the most shit about and get away with. You can even get raised for doing it. You know what I'm saying? Like, even like media houses use shit on European men all the time.
I mean, the best example of it, they call it I don't know if they call it the Ann Coulter rule, but she popularized it, where she says, okay, if you're seeing some generic headline about a crime that was committed and they don't say that they're white, like you can guess exactly what race it is, basically.
Yeah, it's not white then, that we know, which
Right,
is
and that's that's also why they use the term Asian to cover up, right, Middle Eastern crimes in European countries. People will
yeah.
call that, they'll say, oh, now he's being racist. Oh, that's a conspiracy. No, I'm sorry. Like, people got to stop like not giving the Wignats and the alt right and that whole collective people. Yeah, you have to acknowledge when the things they're saying are just like incontrovertibly correct. Okay, and yeah, you can do that without being a Nazi. It's not difficult. You might notice
Just
in
be
this thing so
honest.
far, we've said a lot of things that'll probably piss off a lot of coffee shop anti-feminists, because they're going to think these fuckers, these faggots sound real woke right now. I don't like that. They're talking too much about black issues, right? And we can also turn on the other hat and say, yeah, and also the media is engaged in a bunch of nefarious anti-white bullshit. All
Like,
these things can all be true at the same time.
and it's also that, like, if you talk about men's issues from an intersectional perspective, then you have to talk about Black issues as well, and about the white issues, actually, if we can call it that as well, because those men are still are men, like, and there is a lot of overlap when it comes to how you get treated for your sex and your race. Like, you can't speak about one without the other. If you really care about men as a whole, you have to speak about men of different races, because they don't actually get treated the same. If you say, yeah, but they all get treated poorly, yeah, but not in the same way, and then and you used to dismiss that there's a racial disparity. That's just like when people say, but that happens to women too. Yeah, but not to the same extent. Like, it's fairly important. And even if you like were to speak about people say, oh, you sound like an SJW, you sound like woke, you sound like all that, and I'm like, well, you have said before, if these woke people were correct in their facts, then their angry reaction would be reasonable. Like, if we have all the facts correct, which we do, then just becoming sounding like them would be completely logical. Why would that even be a bad thing? You know what I'm saying?
Sorry, I missed the last part. That was fast.
No, but I was basically just underlying that if we sound like the woke people, but we have our facts right and the woke doesn't, then it doesn't really matter what we sound like, because the problem with the woke is the facts, not the reaction.
Sure. I mean, yeah, sunlight is the best disinfectant, as they say. I can't say that's not true, but I think we both know perfectly well that just being right is not going to be good enough.
Yeah, but my point is that if they go for how we sound or our tone when we have our facts right, then what is actually their point? Like, be correct, and therefore reacting very angrily
Yeah.
is completely proportionate.
I mean, the thing that always gets me though is whenever someone's tone policing, what they've immediately done, right, is they've created a distinction in their mind between the content of what you're saying and the tone, and then they've criticized the tone. But if they
Yeah.
got that far, that means that they can engage with the content, right? So it's just a bullshit, disingenuous excuse 100% of the time. So that drives me up the fucking wall when they say, you know, if you approach things in a little bit more of a calm-headed way, and like didn't use words like I calling people cunts and retards all the time, they might listen to you more. And it's like, yeah, I get it, but fuck those cunts and retards, right? Like, they need to do better. Like, that's not on me, right? If someone wants to take the content of what they're saying and repackage it, you know, and give it the Warren Farrell koala bear treatment, fucking go for it. There's absolutely space for that, right? But there's also space for the other side of things. We should be pushing the limits of what we're allowed to say to kind of wake people up. And, you know, these are outrageously ridiculous things. The lack of care and concern for men's issues is, in my opinion, the absolute greatest scandal in human rights of all time. So I'll hear sweet fuck all, you know, about someone's tone being too harsh or whatever. You know, maybe people could speak more clearly, but you could always speak more clearly. And if you say things one way, that means you can't say it the other way. And you just can't do both at the same time. So I always say more is more. And yeah, I'm going to be a little bit of a cunt because we got to wake people up, right? This is a dry topic.
But we also like
gotta, you know.
Yeah, but it's not. We also like need to like. People basically say, "Oh no, don't do the intersectional round." I'm like saying, but why shouldn't I do that when the facts are all there? The facts are correct. I'm right about the things I'm saying.
Right. Well, and if they're going to have an issue with it, they need to present some other model, right? And then they're going to have to explain to us how it's not just intersectionality with different labels moved around. Because if they're trying to address the facts, right, they're they're just going to bury the turd and then repackage it a different way, you know. And if that's kind of more aesthetically pleasing to them and it helps them navigate the ideas, then that's great and that's wonderful and I support it. But like, then you kind of got to notice other people might have their own way of approaching it. And I think that appropriating the term intersectionality, we're not even really appropriating it, we're just actually applying it, just realizing that, of course, masculinity and maleness is an aspect of it.
And to say that that's like always a benefit is like absolutely, that's like demonstrably false. Like, all the men's issues in sexual mentions proves that being a male in many instances is actually going to affect you in a negative way. And if you really want to care about men overall, you have to admit that men of different demographics have different issues to different extent that are different from the female counterpart and from men overall. And if you can't accept that, then you don't actually care about men overall. You only care about the men's issue that most men share. Okay, so what about all the other issues that men have because they're male and not female? Because all the intersectional men's issues are because we are not female in part, right? And if you take the issues and only fix the thing about sex and not the other aspects, you don't really fix the issue as a whole. You're just like lessing in it, and that's not enough. You need to completely eradicate it, and this is the only framework that we have to eradicate it properly. So therefore, like I said, you are more likely to see the media speak poorly about white men as a whole, and white people in general. So therefore, white men get it double. It's a piling intersection, right? It's very simple. But it's actually
Another thing, this is a bit of a caveat. I think it was City Crusher had put it this way. I might be misappropriating, but I'm pretty sure it was him. He said, when people are complaining about racism, what they're actually complaining about is men of that race, right? The maleness is just women, right?
Yes.
And if you look at it in terms of a piling or a magnifying sort of a thing, like the fact that that's already, insofar as that's the case, right, that it's already implicitly put into the conversation means it's totally like unavoidable.
Oh, absolutely. Like you can't. It's very. People try to say, no, that's not a man thing. It's a race thing. I'm like saying that they're trying to separate things that belong together. Like, why do they do that? You can say it's both. Like, it is often both. It's usually not just one or the other. It's usually both, and that's the reason why this approach is the most accurate one in actually fixing the issue. Because how can we fix the issue about men if we don't see that the men of different races or other demographics have different issues to different extent? It's just very it's just important. It's very important.
Well, and I think part of it too is with bigotry. An aspect of it is the dehumanization. A person with a gynocentric worldview, or as Pink and Yellow puts it, a female supremacist worldview. I think he hit the nail on the head with that. It is female supremacy. Fundamentally, it's they see women as humans, and then they see men as, human doings, as we say, right? And if someone's a mere human doing, well, yeah, that means that it's much easier to just pick apart every single aspect of their identity and then treat them individually. Oh, but then, the strong Black lesbian, that she must be conceived as a whole, right? It's the whole person.
Yeah, we need to look at the intersectional demographics as a whole. We can't just look at the issues separately. That's the reason why the unique issues are, and you can't just pile them up. You need to look at them uniquely as well.
Yeah, well, and I think the fact that they fail to see men and boys as human beings, that's why when they create woke media and they try to just, make their character be this example, right, that's going to check all the woke boxes, and then people look at it and it's like, that's a dude with tits. It's a dude with tits, right? But of course, that's all they can do. They look at these male characters, right? These male protagonists, this decidedly male thing, which is like to have a plot, to have things that happen. It's distinctly male, but they're not viewing males as people. So that's why they don't see these characters in a three-dimensional way, which is why they think that, oh, well, fuck it, let's just make them black. That doesn't change anything. Well, fuck it, let's just make it a woman. Who cares, right? Yeah, and that's why when they try to create these woke sort of perfect examples of like, oh, now we're going to make it from that Black female perspective, right? And then it's dead on arrival because even their target audience is like, this isn't me. Like, this is just, you put in a little quick, you put in a scene where somebody asks to touch her hair and she says no, right? And they go, oh, we did it. The Black women they're gonna know that we get it because we put the thing in there, right? And like, you can hear them rolling their eyes. They're not stupid, right? So that's the tragedy of woke, is it doesn't even help the people it panders to. And I'll say it in honor of Pride Month. Let's throw it out there. Same thing's happening to Pride Month, right?
Well, I do want to go back to
We're fucking sick of it, you know? We're sick of having our sexual identity, something very personal and core to our being, just used as a callous, soulless marketing scheme, and for people to just lazily throw about their just vapid, nonsensical worldviews and then to repackage it as though they're these great allies or whatever, when they're just a bunch of shallow, retarded cunts.
Yeah, but if they don't look at intersectional men's issues, like from how affect gay men, they don't really care about the gay population as a whole. So
no, they don't see it as a problem. They see it as an opportunity. That's my new catchphrase is, to a feminist, rape is not a crime, it's an opportunity.
Sure.
And I think that applies just straight up to just about every single issue that they address.
Yeah, or claim to address, because
follow the money.
Because like I'm basically saying that like you go back to like the media, like how they can talk about white men so badly all the time. It's actually like not all white men, because I need to like be a little bit more compartmentalized when it comes to like how I'm sorry, I got interrupted. Can you leave? I'm sorry, I'm getting interrupted by someone. I need to stop talking. Anyhow, so I got very rudely interrupted there. Sorry for anybody. But
yeah, I had some rude interruptions earlier today when I was recording the video I'm uploading later. It's like I sit down to record the video, then immediately there's a bunch of noise in the hallway and the cops are showing up. But I think it was a black cop showed up to like act as a surrogate father, head of household for like 10 minutes, and now they've all calmed down.
So, we're getting into that topic soon, but I need to finish this one first.
Sorry, that was a derailment. Go ahead.
Yeah, and that is that like when it comes to like really, it's not just that they attack white men in the media as a whole, because it is quite, people can't agree what is actually meant with white usually. So I know the law say white is any like people of Europe, Middle East, North African origin. But even though most people don't agree with the definition, and sometimes when they say white, it would be any of these demographic when they say that in the media, right? But the thing is that when it comes to European men, and then I'm talking about men with racial origins in Europe, right, would be a subsection of white, right? Thus, you can't speak very badly about men of Semitic, like Arab or Jewish descent, or like of North African descent in like very badly publicly. That's considered to be racist, right? Because it is, right? But you are allowed to say anything about European men defined racially. You can say so much shit about them, way more than you can about white men as a whole. And that's a further magnifying about problems affecting men of different races, because the European men get the shortest end of that stick. So should I go into next example?
Yeah, there's definitely, this is one I think is a good one to stick a pin in, to just keep an eye out for examples as they come, that's one I'm going to be remembering as like a perennial fixture, because it's like so ubiquitous that you just roll your eyes when you see it, right? It's kind of like when you see double standards in headlines regarding like female perpetrators, right, versus male perpetrators, and things like that. But yeah, that just in general, the amount of bigotry that just oozes out of the implications of the choice of terms and headlines is just absolutely staggering. And just on that alone, so much can be demonstrated and understood and pointed out. So yeah, and I think that is like a really, really interesting observation. And I think it's practically unassailable that there's an anti-white bias there, which it's easy for people to miss that, So that's one that I think definitely it's of interest. Very easy to miss. Very, very easy to miss. Whereas like being black male and in the criminal justice system, that one is like glaring. That one's like, if you miss it, you didn't even try, right? But
Right,
I
we
think we're
have the
going
one
on
with
to is this barriers to education, right?
yeah. That is the one that if you look at the education system, we both know. Usually the men's issue, I'm just going to assume everybody knows. That's why I don't go into that so deeply. But we do know that the boys' access to education, and even men have access to education, of course, is not as good in many aspects as women's. And what I mean by that, I can't talk. What I mean by that is that first of all, like the education system is actually just laid up in a way that is easier for girls. We can unpack that another day. You can look up the app. That's not the point. Just accept it as being the case for this discussion. And then we also know that there are certain things like affirmative action programs, and that is that men do get discriminated when it comes to admission to higher education in many jurisdictions because of those policies that are explicitly sexist. But what I will have to a point in that is about education, and that is that if you have a certain type of disability, or like if you have like autism or ADHD or like any type of physical disability that affects your mood or like your body, your ability to write and all that, that is a huge discrimination. There's a huge discrimination when it comes to disability in education, even though the disability that you've been discriminated against is not an intellectual disability at all. We're talking about people that are very intelligent, like very intelligent people, right? But they still get discriminated against because of their disability. But they also get discriminated against because of their sex, right? Which means it's magnified for boys, which means that you get it because you're male and because you're disabled when it comes to access to education. Like you try to do your best, but because you can't concentrate that long, or because your hands doesn't work properly, uh, or because you have other medical problems, you don't get to do it, right? And that is discriminatory. And sometimes you have there are like accommodations that can be made, but that accommodation is only to pass. And if you just pass with a very low grade, you're not going to be able to do anything with that anyway. So you're not being graded fairly. Like you're not being graded fairly, and then when you apply to higher education, they look at you as though you have way lower performance and abilities than you actually have, right? Just because you have a disability. And that's unfair. It's very unfair. It's discrimination under the law, legal discrimination. But it's also discrimination because you're male. Males have harder time in education and also get discriminated when applying to education and when they are studying. This is an intersectional men's issue after all. And one cannot look at men's issues without looking at the ableist discrimination in education too. It's basically just magnifying the same issue. You're muted. You're still muted. I can't hear you.
Well, sorry about that. But yeah, definitely, it really can't be understated the amount of information we have demonstrating that women and girls really get privileged treatment in education. There's absolutely no interest in achieving equality in this way. They just want as much for women and girls as possible. And they'll choose whatever goal shifted metric they want, right? To just always justify female supremacy. So you measure this in terms of, well, look at women in STEM. And it's like, yeah, okay, well, look at men in nursing and teaching and caregiving, right? Like,
why don't they can apply? And even here's another problem: women that are underrepresented in fields, they usually have their standards of entry lower to get in there. It's because there are fewer women applying. So
well, and then also they get all of these special privileges through like government grants and everything, all of this special propping up that people are investing in just so that they can be a doctor for maybe a couple of years, get bored of it, have some kids, and then just not do it. And if they do kind of balance both, well, certainly they're not doing it to the degree that a non-mother, right, all of things being equal, would, right? And it's just this ridiculous sort of it's like they see themselves as deities, right? They're not constrained by the 24-hour day, right? If you have a job and you're a mother and you volunteer, you're three people, baby, right? Whereas if you're someone who's like, well, I just work my job and that's kind of my focus, it's like you're not allowed to reap any sort of acknowledgement or benefit from the fact that like you're a better worker, you show up more, you do more overtime, right? You're more interested in it, you're less like taxed by what you're doing outside of work, that sort of a thing. There's less of a respect for the fact that people can choose their own balances, and some people kind of are putting eggs in one basket and kind of specializing. And a lot of these grants and affirmative actions and special scholarships and privileges we give women, it's on the premise that like, oh fuck, we need more doctors. We really, really need more. We need people to do this job. So these people take that money and then they don't have any sense of obligation to stay in the career for any serious amount of time. And if you're having an issue like, wow, it sucks that I need to wait 3 weeks to see a doctor again. Oh my God, like to see a specialist, it's not until next year. And look at the fucking price on the copay, right? Well, all these things are being driven up and being affected by the lack of supply. And that lack of supply is coming from the fact that we're just not being honest about women's contribution to the workforce.
But it's not just that women get like they have an easy time in education and get propped up for education. There are more programs to help them in education where they're underrepresented. But if you're disabled, you get both drawbacks for being disabled and for being a man, right? I argue that aren't there more? I'm not sure if this is the case, but there seems to be more accommodations or like extra for women who are perfectly normal than it is for disabled people overall, when they obviously need it more than women.
I mean, hey, if we want to, if that's how we're going to measure it, then just nut up and call it a disability, right? And this is kind of a phrase we go to. We say, all right, like, which way, Western woman? Are you an adult? Are you an overgrown, retarded child, right? It can't be both. It can't be one sometimes, then the other some other times. Which is it? And like for a lot of women, that's the choice they want is overgrown, retarded child. And these women are called traditionalists.
Yes, right. And but something about traditionalism is that it doesn't really affect in a man having a disability overall, which makes it extremely misandric in an intersectional way. Because but we get to that later. But I would like to say that like women aren't disabled. Like you aren't like disabled because you say you are. You are because you are, like, because your body physically cannot do things in the same way other people's bodies can overall for the species that you are belonging to. Like for example, if you have a disability, right, there are extra problems in education, arbitrary criterias that test you more for your disability than it tests you for your ability to actually perform in education.
Well, now right here, though, I think we're kind of talking explicitly about like mental and behavioral side of things, right?
No, also physical, because
I think
sometimes
no. Okay, I'm going to push back on this. I think that in terms of physical disabilities, I expect it's fairly equal opportunity, because if we're talking about things like access, right? Like the wheelchair ramp isn't sexist. The parking spaces are sexist, right? But like in terms of the accessibility of like we need to accommodate being like letting people physically get to their classes, right? And whatever they need to help them carry things, help them keep things organized, right? Like when they just have a handicap in that way. And I'd imagine like if you're thinking wheelchairs, right? The accommodations made for people in wheelchairs are the same regardless of your sex and race. I think.
That is correct.
Although you could argue, right, well, if you have like a racial ghettoization, right, a school with less funding, this then goes into how you might have like a racial or maybe a poverty based, right, issue where it's Yeah, but in terms of like controlling for that social class and that neighborhood, right? Yeah, I think that those kinds of accommodations, we can safely say there's not a whole lot of like male versus female discrimination in that regard.
No, it's not in the accommodation itself, but it is that if there are inadequate accommodation in some aspects, both in like psychosocial and physical disability, that is going to be an obstacle when it comes to performing well in school, regardless of your intelligence, right? And how high you try. And if you add that up to the problem that men get overall in education, if you're a man with a disability, you get both problems at the same time when you go to education. That's the issue. You see what I'm going with?
Oh, I see. So you're saying that you have the disabilities separately, and then the male, yeah, and then yeah, of course.
And then if you have them both, it's like that's a piling example. It's a
Right, but
piling.
in regards to the particular issue, we don't quite have the synthesis. It's just piling. It's a great example of that one for sure.
Well, that's
And I
what
think
I
that one it is
mean.
kind of like a strictly additive thing. I think that's a good example of one where you can do the quote unquote dumb intersectionality of like, yeah, it's all these things that we just have the list keep going, and like I don't think there's very much overlap either. I think it's like a perfect piling, honestly.
Precisely, that's the reason why it's very good to distinguish that with magnifying intersections, because when it comes to
And
like,
then wait, before you go, the magnifying aspect in terms of disability, I think this is where mental and behavioral,
yes,
where it does get messy, and in the particular treatment of mental and behavioral diagnoses, like is bigoted against men in its own right, and that is what makes it more of a magnifying issue than a piling issue.
right, but it's not only that; it's also that many jurisdictions in the world, then you get very little accommodation if you have a disability like that, even though you are very intelligent and have it, right? So therefore, they say, "Oh, you might get some extra time. Everybody get extra time. Um, but like that's very little, and sometimes, many often, right? Very often, right? You get very little accommodation. Like, God, I lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. I have brain fog. I'm like completely lost now. It's basically like it's very hard for people with like mental disorders to do certain educations, right? And you get accommodation, right? But then if you pass, they say it's good enough. You don't need any more accommodation. So you might have a certifiable intelligence of like 138 or something like that, really high, right? Very smart person, right? And he really tries very hard, but because of his like disability, he just doesn't perform very well because the way it's set up. You know what I'm saying?
Sorry, again, I missed I got a little distracted because Red Raptor showed up, and I was like, oh yeah, last time I saw you was when I was doing my in-game wedding, and I told everybody we had a divorce beach party. That was my
Right,
bad.
right. But I need to focus here because I lost something I thought here before, and that is that there are very inadequate accommodations if you have a disability like that in education, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
means that your grades are suffering, and if you pass, then they think problem is solved, but you're not being graded fairly. You're being graded lower just because of your disability.
Wait, I'm sorry. You're saying if you have the extra accommodation, you're graded lower?
No, because you don't have enough accommodation, and they
Oh, I
only
see. Right. If it's inadequate, and then it's going to result in a lower grade. Sure. I mean,
right,
here's the
and
thing, though.
therefore,
It cuts both ways, though, because it depends. Like it's more true the more divorced the academic thing is from like an actual position in reality, which generally they are very, very divorced to the point where they're practically completely irrelevant. Because I think that pedagogically speaking, most schools and teachers are garbage. So, but basically, like if you have though, like, okay, this is a test of things, and like you have to know these things and you have to be able to do these things reliably in order for you to be successful at the thing that you're being educated and trained for. At that point, like the accommodations got to be real fucking judicious, right? Because you can't have someone have a certain standard where they have all of these accommodations in the education setting and then those just disappear or don't translate into the work setting, right?
Yeah, but you
So if
usually
there's
don't
a
have
point
the
where if the
accommodation.
test is actually perfectly relevant, then the accommodations, they would need to be exactly right, like what you would reasonably anticipate like an employer would offer, you know?
No, here's basically what education must be. This is how education should be, right? And that is that if you are tested for knowledge, you're tested for have you learned these things? Do you know these things, right? And if you have a disability, right, you don't get to show that you have learned these things, and you don't get the opportunities to learn these things because of your disability. So therefore, even though you know it is as good as the other people, and if you have accommodation, right, you would get it very well, then you don't get it. So therefore, you're not getting graded or tested because of your abilities. You're getting graded because of your disabilities. Like if you have these disability, you don't get the grade you deserve. You get a lower grade just because you have a disability.
I guess right, but like what does the grade represent?
It represent your what you have learned and what you know and how you perform, which is just as good as the other people. So therefore, you get a lower grade just because you have a disability.
But you see what I mean though, how like it could be like there's a point where it's like are they grading you or Inspector Gadget, right? And maybe that's a little bit rare, right? That it reaches such an extreme. But basically, yeah, if we're just great, I mean, what kinds of accommodations do we really need for an equal grade, right? Like one typical one is you might like be able to have extra time, right? We'll say, okay, well, you just don't have a time limit. But at that point, it's like the test is fundamentally changed. That is fundamentally different. You know what I mean? If you think
Right,
about a
but now it's
standardized
accessible to all.
test, there's reasons that we need to control variables and keep it all the same. And I suppose, like, probably the crudest sort of a metric you could use would be like, well, hey, people with this condition, on average score 20% less. So let's just give them a handicap of plus so many points, which
Well,
is, what
that's
they
not the
do with
solution.
that's exactly what they do with the racial disparities, right? With the,
But
with
that is added to the
with
discrimination.
admissions exams, right? And that's why part of this ties into like a, what do we call it? A magnifying. No, is this magnifying? No, a unique one applied to Asians, right? That if you're Asian, you just have to do that much better because of the
Yeah,
average. Because we just assume that
no,
that you
that
don't
is
deserve your greatness because you're too smart.
right. No, that is what I'm saying is, and the same thing happened to if you're disabled. Like I can actually give a perfect example if this right. If you take a shithole country like Sweden, for example, who's have really bad education system, right? Then you almost never get graded for what you do. You almost get graded for how if you're disabled or not, for example, right? So if you, for example, right, didn't know at the age of 15 exactly what subject you needed, right? Then if you want to take a high school subject after you finish high school, right? They say that, oh, you can take this subject that you have a year to do usually, but do it in like 10 weeks, for example, right? But then if you have like ADHD or autism, you basically say that, but I can't do that much in that short time. It doesn't work. Then your disability becomes a hindrance, but it otherwise it's not a hindrance. They are artificially making a very short time limit, and then just to make sure that you get a lower grade just because you have a disability. Like that's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and basically what I'm saying about that is that if you know that, and boys generally, men have generally harder time to perform in education, right? Even though, and that's because how it's structured, right? then you get both things, and that's a huge problem. And there are other problems, that disabilities that affect your ability to be able to eat food, and you're able to hold a pen. That means if you can't hold a pen still or eat enough, you can't sit in a test that long because you get hungry. And if you can't eat, or if you have disabilities when it comes to your concentration, you will fail the test just because you have a disability, which has happened to me several times, I might add.
Wait, I have never like eaten a snack during a test. In fact, I think it's practically ubiquitous. Like every single school I've been in, you don't eat in class. Maybe you bring a beverage, right? Like some water, a Gatorade or something. A can of soda, that's fucking pushing it. And this is like regardless of if you're in public or private school. Like I don't know. I find that very strange. Like you
I
you
can
plan
draw.
for the test, you eat before the test.
Yeah, I know that, but here's the problem. Here's the problem. Like, a lot of people who are disabled physically cannot eat as well as normal people.
Sure.
And that means that if you need to get a test and you can basically not eat food, then you physically speaking cannot eat enough before the test. And if that
Okay.
test,
I can
then you
see that
cannot.
there's a larger nutritional deficit, right?
Exactly. And also it's not just that, but like if you also have other mental disorders that makes your concentration difficult, right? Even though you're intelligent, right? Even though you know the facts, and you can't focus, especially not when you're hungry. Being hungry is not going to make you focus better. And that's also like factually true, and people need to like know about that. But it just gets worse because if you're a male, you still have the other issues to deal with, discrimination, right? But your disability, you're not going to stop being hungry if you need to eat. Like you might have diabetes or something like that, or Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which means you cannot really eat that well sometimes, right? So therefore, you're just gonna get fucked, not because of your like knowledge, only because of your body. Like that's the only thing that limits you there, and it's only because they have a rule that says you can't eat here because why not? You have to eat. You can't eat beforehand. It's not possible, like physically, right? And some jurisdictions do allow you to eat, right? But not all. And then there is discrimination, and that is going to feed back into your sex-based discrimination when you are using your grades to apply for higher education. Because then, if you're male, then they are going to make it harder for you if they feel it's more male than female, and then that's going to be a hindrance. And then they have a
Right.
based
Yeah,
on
so I
race.
think this is where, like in the chat here, Paul was like, is this still about intersectionality? And it's like, yeah,
Yes.
we'll get there, but it's piling, right? We have to put the pieces together. So that's where it has the impact, right? Is that if you're getting lower test scores because you're disabled, but you happen to be female, well, at least you kind of get special privilege treatment in terms of having a lower bar for getting literally any job or accepted into literally anything you do, anything education wise, right? If you're male, well, now you have this higher standard you have to reach that just immediately got impacted by your disability. So yeah,
Exactly.
that's the missing piece of it. Shout out to Pill Eater in the chat because AXA, he means Asian Aryan. That is absolutely an intersection that, yeah, they're oppressed, man. It's not fair.
Yeah,
So
poor
space
Indians.
space for the Asian Aryans, 100%. So you have that.
Because like what I do want to say is that you have many, like I said, example that if you miss the grade in high school, you have to speed run it later. But if you have like autism or ADHD, depending on to what extent, or if you have like another physical condition that like affects your like ability to like do anything, right? Like concentrate, eat, and move your arms and stuff like that. It's also you're not going to be able to speed run it. Therefore, that specific later high school education is only going to be, it's going to be much harder for someone with a disability than for a normal person when that barrier does not exist in basic education for the same level. You just make it so that, well, yeah, no, you can't get accommodation done because you have a disability, because you have to speed run it now, because completely healthy people can do that, but you can't if you have a disability. And it's like, well, then fuck you then, because we don't care, because we are supposed to do it like all the other normal people, even if your body don't allow it. Because if you have a condition like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which I got, or a condition like cerebral palsy, and you can't physically hold a pen very well, you might be able to like physically hold the pen enough to fill in the things, and then you would have way lower performance level than if you weren't forced to hold a pen like that.
Right. So even if the accommodation sort of gets you there, or if it's like, yeah, but you could still do it, right? Then they can still push you, right? In which case it's like, yeah, the impact is still going through, but then like there's sort of this quantum problem, right? Where like does it reach a point where it's like an integer where we can do a thing, or is it kind of like a scrap of a fraction of a thing where we just kind of are letting it go? Which
no,
I
you
think
can
that's
do something
a little bit
because
what Red Raptor had mentioned when, she points out here, like, if you're smart enough, then they'll probably just tell you to suck it up and, and deal with it, which,
yeah, they do that exactly. They basically say, like, for example, if you are very smart and you're very interesting, you're very intelligent, but you have a disability, right? Then you might be able to use all your effort because of the artificial barriers they have imposed on the education system that don't have no reason to be there for anybody, really.
I mean, all
Um,
these problems, yeah, like education just creates its own problems to solve. And I think you could just abolish the entire fucking thing, bring back child labor, and we'd all be happier and more educated and more productive.
yeah, but now we have to look at it in the framework of society.
I
Um,
know, I know we have to exist in society. It's good
right,
to
and
have a
therefore, and therefore, like what I'm saying here is very important, because like they say that it is not fair that just because you have a disability and you're very intelligent, you have very high knowledge, that you should get a D, while the same person with exact same um, intelligence and up skills in like, and is just as good as you in every way, get A, and you get a D because of a disability. It's not fair grading, it's unfair grading. And therefore many systems say like, well, if you pass, then it's fine because there's so many other people who doesn't pass. But in reality, if you have a D, you're not gonna get into college anyway. So what's the fuck is the point to get a D? Because if you have physical disability, you are more likely to need higher education to get certain types of jobs, right? It doesn't involve physical labor, right? And you have that barriers because if you look at education system, you don't need to speed run courses, and you can't because of a disability. And they say, well, you can still pass, even though that will do nothing for you. It's completely useless. Then you're still discriminated against. You're not graded fairly. It's not about being able to pass, it's about being graded fairly. And you don't get graded fairly for your disability, just as you don't get graded fairly because of your sex.
Yeah,
Like,
and this is something, obviously I know that you know this, but it's one thing that we point out in the anti-feminism manosphere is that teachers are bigots. They're just bigoted graders. They give girls higher marks for the same work. They've done these experiments countless times where they, do them gender blind, and then, oh, all of a sudden the boys are doing a lot better. And then if you even ask the students will correctly perceive that male teachers are more fair than the female ones. So any way you could measure that, like, yeah, it does play out in the data predictably, and that's why people don't talk about it, because the more you talk about it, they really stand to gain nothing and lose everything.
right, but what I'm saying is that like there are a sex-based issue and there's also a disability issue when it comes to education, right? And that just to be graded fairly, and then add that's the magnifying intersection, right? And now it comes to the piling, and then when you apply that to go into higher education, your grade is going to be lower not because you're dumber, not because you didn't try hard, not because you don't know enough. You know just as well as the people with high grades, but you get grade lower just because of your disability and because of your sex. And then when you get into education, you're going to have another barrier that is there, higher education barrier access there, when it comes because of your sex, right? So then that gets like piled onto that, and that thing gets magnified. There's a magnifying there, and that is that that white men don't get affirmative action, while some men of color might, but not Asians. So Asian men have an even harder time than the white men, right? But then there's an other magnifying here, and that is that East Asian men come from cultures where they usually perform very well. They usually be able to overcome these barriers because they have high performance level, while Southeast Asian men are not that, right? Southeast Asians are not that, which means that, but they get treated like though they were East Asian, even though the performance level is like white people, right? Or even lower than that on average. I don't really know, but it's very much lower than East Asians. But they need to meet the East Asian barrier for the same entrance, and not the entrance a white person would meet, right? Especially, absolutely not as a black person would meet, right? So therefore, you have your disability, physical and like mental, even though we're very intelligent, right? And then it is your sex in multiple level. Then it is if you're white, and then it is like if you are East Asian, it's even worse. And then if you're Southeast Asian, it's even worse. So there's a lot of things that goes in the intersection. It's so fucking book, right?
Well, and here's the funny thing too, is that people kind of probably have a colloquial bigotry where they'll think, ooh, this person became a doctor despite being a black woman. That means she knows her shit. And meritocracy is the opposite of affirmative action for a reason, and everybody knows the reason. So it's actually kind of the opposite. It's like, holy shit, like this old white dude is probably the best doctor ever. Like, I mean, obviously,
probably the Asian dude is even.
I mean, I'm talking kind of like what you would gamble on versus like a coin flip, you know?
Yeah, well, that's true.
Obviously, everything, it's all bell curves all the way down. But yeah. So I'm thinking we have way fucking more topics than we're ever going to get through. I think that we should go to the next topic and make it kind of the capstone last one, because it kind of involves a group that we haven't quite touched on. And since it's Pride Month, that'll be appropriate. And then we'll be looking at, roughly like a just under 2 hour stream, which I think is about perfect. My aim for these streams is to kind of keep them, like more than an hour, less than two, right? So that people don't see these big, long, daunting videos, and then it's hard to find stuff. But then also when it's like, hey, let's have another stream, it's not like, oh, better get comfy for another 4 hours. You know what I mean? So.
Do you mind if I just read the issues and then you talk about it while I go to the bathroom?
What?
Because I need to go to the bathroom. So can I just read the next issue and then you comment on it when I finish reading it, and then you.
Yeah. So you introduce it, take a quick break, right? And then I'll kind of talk about it to introduce it a bit. Yeah.
And I let you know when I'm finished, so that you know when you should begin to talk about it, right? And that is the access to parenthood, right? That is that. I'm gonna start with it because there's like two different like fields: disability and sexuality, right? One is much quicker, so I begin with disability, right? That is that. Unlike women, men of several disabilities, like paralysis, for example, have a much hard, or even spinal muscular atrophy, have much harder to conceive naturally compared to their female counterparts with the same disability. This is the case with many men of many different disabilities. And there's very little, help from society there. But and it's also harder for them to like hold a job to pay for it themselves, by the way. So that's the disability problem with that. But there's also a sexuality problem with that, and that is that if you are a gay couple, for example, then you need to use a surrogate if you want biological children. And in many countries that is illegal, right? That is illegal in many countries to use a surrogacy, right? But not in some countries, right? So if you are a man that's gay and you're a gay couple, you need to be in a surrogacy-friendly country, right? Otherwise, it's very hard. And even if you have it, it's not subsidized. So therefore, you have to pay for it yourself, which is very expensive, right? But there's another level to that, and that is that your race, your ethnicity, is that if you are of a same-sex couple and same ethnicity couple, you want to use an egg donor of your ethnicity. You don't want to, want to use like a woman egg donor of a different ethnicity when you're going to have your own kid, because then it's not, yeah, that's not fair, because straight people don't have to do it, lesbian doesn't have to do that, right? So therefore, if you are of an ethnicity that is very uncommon in a surrogacy-friendly country, it's very hard for you to get access to have your own biological children with the right egg donor, for example. Because if you, like, for example, are two guys, right? And one guy is of Irish descent and one guy is of German descent, and they want to have a baby together. Very easy to use a German egg donor or an Irish egg donor in America. Easier to find. Very difficult if you are a man of Occitan descent or of, let's say, anyhow, I don't know. Let's say Flemish descent, right? Mainly because America doesn't really connect data on those ethnicities because they don't have their own countries, and they're rare in the United States. So therefore, if you're a couple like that, it's going to be very hard for you to get access to have the right egg donors compared to a gay couple of a different ethnic combination. And also, like, depending on where you live in the world. Like, if you're of Russian origin, it's going to be easy for you if you're a Russian man to have an egg donor because surrogacy is legal in Russia. But you're not going to be able to marry your partners. You can't share custody in the same way. So that's also a problem. Because many countries are accessible to surrogacy, only let it do to straight couples and somewhat to single men. And then if you want to get married, you kind of like have to move to another country, right? And then it might not even be recognized. It's very hard for you to share custody. So it's a lot of barriers when it comes to gay men having biological children of their own and their own ethnicity. And even if you just want to adopt kids, right, then it's going to be hard if you're not of an ethnicity that there's money kids to adopt, right? Because many people, not all people, want to adopt kids of their own ethnicity if they can't have biological children, right? But even if you don't care, and even if you are of an ethnicity that it's very common that you can adopt kids of your own ethnicity, or if you don't care if your kids is of your own ethnicity, in many jurisdictions it's only legal for same-sex couple, no, for straight couples to adopt as well, right? That's also a thing. Or for single women, so that's also a thing. Not just this, but now think about bisexual men. In a country where surrogacy is legal, a bi guy can be in a same-sex couple or in a straight couple, right? But if surrogacy is illegal, it's going to punish him if he decides to be with another guy. He's going to have way more legal privilege and benefits if he is with a woman because of the law in the country. And then you have all the ethnic consideration to consider, which are important to a lot of people. Thus, this is a huge issue when it comes to access to reproductive ability for men who are disabled and for men who are gay or bi. And now I'm going to go to the bathroom so you can go over all that when I'm gone.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that were brought up for sure. Let's see. So, I mean, I think like the huge big picture thing to look at, right, is in any country that has any amount of socialist nonsense happening in it, we're all forced to subsidize just women deciding to have children. And we've completely destigmatized the idea that any woman would be unfit to be a mother or not prepared to do it, or that they should plan in any sort of way, right? And like the issue is that, you had that phrase, hey, can't beat them, don't breed them, right? I mean, post birth control, that really shouldn't be considered such an unattainable, ridiculous standard, right? I think there is a lot of space for just normalizing, like, the idea that you do have responsibility when you become a parent. And frankly, I pin it on the Abrahamic religions. I think it's the fault of Jews, Christians, and Muslims. I won't go down that entire rabbit hole, but I think that's like the heart of darkness. Basically, that's where the devil lives. And we're coming for you, bitch. We're coming for her. Like, Yahweh, count your fucking days. Actually, you don't even have to count them because numbers aren't a thing to you because you suck at math because you're actually a woman. I see the truth. But anyway, so you have this issue where it's like, okay, like let's just bar any sort of a discussion on like if we should like subsidize things to make it more relatively fair or whatever. Let's just talk neutral and Capistan, right? You know, whatever it is you can pay for with your property, no NAP violations, we're good to go. A lot of these are just like naturally unfair things, and to some degree, just can't do anything about it. And that's, you know, that's fine. But what's particularly ridiculous is that you have, you know, for gay men, the process of like having a child is so much more expensive, right? There's like there's a cost barrier. In particular, if you're gonna incorporate things like artificial uterus, right? Like there's obviously a financial barrier there. So what we have is a situation where people like me are being taxed to pay to feed just irresponsible whores who are just breeding without any consideration or care or concern because it's just their right. And it's kind of like, you know, it would be your right if you were at least self-sufficient, but we know that on average women are not net taxpayers, right? So these selfish, ridiculous choices they're making are being paid for by other people at their expense. And it really is like a theft of the ability to be a parent that women just callously indulge in because they're because like honestly they just don't have any emotional intelligence and they're just kind of like selfish solipsistic bitches, you know. And when I say stuff like that, you know, it's a challenge, right? Like prove me wrong, right? Because it remains to be seen. You know, I don't think it's that difficult of a standard. I will say, JWille, I think a lot of the issues you're talking about on like precisely finding an approximate racial phenotype, I mean, that's way more important to you than probably 98% of the rest of the world. I mean, probably
But
though,
most people can
people
already
are,
do it.
it is more important to people like than people will admit. I mean, the get around, right, is I think usually they choose like a family, like a sister, right? Or someone in the family, because then like it is the same genes and not just someone who's approximately as German as you. But then the other interesting thing is if you're an American, you're probably an Amerimut. So that it's like for me, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I should choose something that's racially similar or whatever. So it looks like me, and I could just like list like, okay, well I got like maybe like 13% of like 5 different ones I can choose from, right? And I was like, oh, let's go with the Russian
I
one.
got the same issue actually. Well, that
But
actually
I mean, is that a
benefit
privilege
from.
though, right? That it's like, oh
Yeah, yeah.
well, now we get to choose. That it's like, yeah.
We are kind of privileged in that it's basically like takes the edge of it because
God,
like
and then if it's left to the gays, they're just gonna choose it based on which countries have the best Eurovision entries.
right, but
So I think we're gonna have the Moldovan super race babies. It's gonna be Moldova,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, but we still cannot stereotype. We're gonna solve the issue, even though the stereotype is probably
Anyway,
true,
I
right?
was just
Because
kind of spitballing in a few different directions there.
like
But yeah, I mean, but also when you bring up that like in terms of like limits on adoption, absolutely anything that we allow a single woman to do, like a single man should be able to do, right?
yeah,
And
of course.
this is where you know, with surrogacy and where with like people like what was it? Oh, it was Paul Buttigieg, right? In his stupid photo where they're like sitting in the like thing, like as though he had the baby. You know, it's just like a stupid fucking photo op, right? And like all of these traditionalists kind of pearl clutching over, like, oh, they're creating designer gabies. It's like, you know, insofar as there is a concern there, like I'm certainly skeptical of like these like popular progressive celebrity gay parents. But that's because I basically think if you're left wing, you're kind of probably a dog shit parent in general.
Probably.
I
But
basically hate everyone to the left of me. Sorry.
isn't that basically everyone? But
I
no, no,
say it with
not everyone.
love, like I mean the best. But like the issue is these fuckers are completely silent on the absolute carnage that is single motherhood, right? And
Right,
like that silence is so deafening. If these fucking trad cuck retards are not willing to, you know, throw in some equal lefts with their equal rights and like really give the comeuppance to single mothers that they've been fucking asking for, then you can discount anything they say. They're just a bunch of
absolutely will.
bigots and homophobes and retards. Like, and
And
what they're doing is
misandrist.
they're taking the notion of parenting and they're weaponizing it for their petty bigotries. You know,
Yeah, like they're absolute fucking idiots because
they don't
like
have souls, is what I'm kind of saying.
they say, "Oh no, gay men can't. You use surrogacy to get a designer baby." Okay, so when a woman choosing a guy which finds to be hot and he had a designer baby, and they're like, "Yeah, but they shouldn't be allowed to do that either." I'm like, "Yeah, but you can't stop them. But you can't stop us because we're a vulnerable population." Like it's
Terrence is asking us
basically.
about vasogel because I had brought up birth control as part of an example there. Have you heard any news about vasogel? I remember hearing about it like, I don't know, like 5 fucking years ago. They're like, we're gonna have it tomorrow, boys. Like,
No, I haven't really heard of it. I do think that is something that men should do, but that's more of a men's issue rather than an intersectional men's issue.
yeah,
It's
I mean,
very
honestly,
basic.
like vasogel and the, you know, the 4gen restoration people, I kind of put them in the same category of like, there's a point where these people are just fucking salesmen, you know, and you absolutely should be skeptical. And
Yeah,
I'm
that they
sorry to
absolutely.
say that vasogel seems like not that sophisticated technology that I'm frankly surprised it doesn't exist. I know there's conspiratorial angles that like it's being actively suppressed. And I think that kind of makes sense, right? I mean, who's going to be using the vasogel?
Men.
White men, right?
No, black men. I think so.
Actually,
But like, if they
I have
really
no
want to
idea
be
to be honest. But
conspiratorial, they would just want the white men to do it because they hate white people and want us all to die out. So I suppose like.
I'm just saying vasogel probably deserves a particle board or two. Now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, we need to have that, but like what I want to say is that when it comes to access to reproduction, because like there's one thing that I mentioned very early when it comes to access to parenthood, is that if you're a man that have a condition like paralysis, um, then or similar disabilities that affect your spine usually, right? Then it's going to be very hard for you to naturally conceive a baby. Um, And not only that, it's also harder for you to get an employment, right? Thus, if you want to have a baby, you have to cover a lot of money. But if you are married in the United States, you don't get paid to take care of your spouse if you can't work. But if you are divorced, you can, and you cannot use your savings. You cannot have enough savings if you're on disability. So therefore, if you are a guy who needs to have IVF to have a baby, right, with his wife because it's a disability, then there's all these fucking arbitrary things that makes it harder for him to do that. And if you're going to have fucking taxpayers mainly funded by men for fucking single mothers and welfare and abortions, why the fuck should the paralyzed men get IVF though?
Wait,
There's
I'm sorry.
no
Wait,
justification for that because people say, but if you're disabled, maybe you shouldn't have kids. Yeah, but you don't inherit a spinal cord injury. Can you inherit a spinal cord? No, you can't. Right?
wait.
So
But then the other issue though is like, are they fit to provide for the child independently?
they're a couple. They don't need to do it themselves. They do it as a couple.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, if I said it's a couple, yeah.
Right. Like if you can do it yourself financially, sure. Like um because if you're a straight guy who's disabled, well, yeah, then you're in the same position as any other straight guy. It's just more expensive for you to have kids, which is a concern that is like make it harder for him for sure. But then even if you get a girlfriend, which is much harder for a guy it might be harder for a guy sometimes, not always, but sometimes, to
Well,
get a
compared to
relationship if he has
what?
a disability. If he has a disability, sometimes.
Well,
I'm
yeah,
not
that's
saying
definitely harder.
right. Like I'm not saying that that's
All
the
things
case
being
for
equal, yes, absolutely.
I'm not saying that that's the case for every guy who's disabled, right? But like, if you have a
I
disability,
mean,
like,
maybe he's niche, and then he has like the epic PUA skills to incorporate that into like something. I don't know
right, but
what's the hottest disability.
I don't know.
Well, let's
Mine
keep
is
that on
because
the
I'm very
back burner. Like,
it makes me very flexible. So I guess that's the one. But
I mean, I think that dudes in wheelchairs could really, really rizz it up. You know,
oh
they got
fuck yeah,
their
I am
party.
100% on board with that.
They can
No
get
pun
it.
intended.
Short guys can get it.
I get it. I absolutely get it. Holy fuck, that's so true. Like, did you hear? I'm all on board. No pun intended.
Oh, there's totally a pun there instead of a board. Something to do with a wheel. Pop that wheelie.
Bro. No, that was funny. But basically, my point is that, of course, that's what you're saying. They can obviously and evidently get a relationship. It's very ableist for people to assume that doesn't happen, right? But it still isn't usually like, it's not easier, if that makes sense, right? Um, but it still happens very often, fairly often, and I don't think that being a disabled is not a deterrent for you to find a partner. Obviously not, regardless if you're gay or straight. But when you are disabled, right, and you find a partner, right, you're going to have to pay extra money for you to get all the IVF treatment to have a kid, because many guys that are paralyzed or any other disability like that have harder time or impossible to conceive naturally. Thus, it is very unfair that there is so little help for those couples when there's so much fucking help for much of other people that doesn't need it as much. Like, if you have taxpayer funded abortion or taxpayer funded welfare for single mothers, then why don't you have taxpayer funded IVF treatment for couple where the man is paralyzed? Like, it's
And of
just like,
course, you know, my mindset's always going to be, well, yeah, we should just stop subsidizing everyone, right?
right, that's good, but because then he has more money, then they can pay for the things that they
But yeah, if
need.
we're going to go collapsitarian, then I want my money to make gabies,
Yeah, like, why
set
shouldn't
them
men who are
loose.
gay or men who are paralyzed get money to have kids when you have women getting money, getting free abortions in some instances, and also like getting welfare money for having kids? Like, it's a
You know what?
very
It's not their fault,
unfair.
okay? Because like people are just leaving these banana peels and erect dicks everywhere. Like you don't know how hard it is being a woman. You step outside and there's just all these just erect penises everywhere. You slip on a banana peel and you fall on a dick. And you know, someone needs to stop them. I don't know who's leaving all these dicks and banana peels everywhere, but that's why, you know, like abortion's a serious issue. It's because there's just dicks and banana peels everywhere. And women, I don't know if you ever tried being a woman. You know, I slap on my Hooters t-shirt and I walk out and it just like, oh God, I'm just so hot and dumb. And it takes like forever. It takes like minutes for like a man to come help you with something. And then whoops, you slip on a banana peel and fall on a dick. You know, like it's not fair. Gotta have some compassion, right? We gotta step into their shoes and truly empathize.
Sure, okay, that's it all the time, but therefore, like, why, if you are a guy with a disability or a guy in a gay couple, right? Why are they not told to have compassion for those type of men? I think it's time that if you're gonna play the game of being compassionate and having all these subsidies forever, it should go to those men because they need way more than those women. And if they say they need it, then those men definitely need it too.
Yeah, I think that drag queens basically have the right idea of being a woman, but there's one thing they haven't done enough. They need to like be more entitled and politically motivated, and they need to not break character when they're making these fucking demands.
Right. But my point is that, like,
I think we can capture RuPaul, and RuPaul can help us.
yeah, probably, but I think we kind of like drifting off because, like, I just wanted to very much segment the fact that um if if we're MRAs, right, then we should definitely demand these subsidies Because why should men always be like, oh, we need to think about the bigger pictures being unfair, and then for women's interest, people can just say, oh, she needs it, and then everything else doesn't matter, right? It's just like the double standards that I see is that if women get to have these things, then men get to have these things. Like just like that's just fair. And um, I'm asking that men get things, so that some men, a small minority of men, get things that almost all women have for free anyway, even subsidies, even if they don't need it. So why shouldn't men get it? They should get it too. It's only fair.
Yeah. I mean, can't disagree, but of course, that brings us to where we're at with the entire body of gendered issues, right?
Yeah, and this is why we need to portray this, because completely empirically and completely fairly, if people believe in these like subsidies or whatever, then subsidies these things. Or even if they don't subsidize things, like yet let us like completely throw out that even though if you subsidize the things for women, you should do it for men too, right? That's just fair, right? That's just obvious, right? Especially as men have the majority of taxpayers, right? But okay, let you throw away all the subsidies. You just say that they should have it, but now let's talk about then it's moving on, right? Uh, let's say that we don't need to have the subsidies, but it at least should be fucking legal. Many of jurisdictions,
Right. No,
these
that's where
treatments
it's
are
like there
illegal.
ought to be some blood in the
That's the
streets.
biggest problem.
Yeah.
It's fucking illegal. Why is these things illegal? Like it doesn't make any sense. It's literally like having like a specific type of man who is the minority, and then telling him that, well, just fuck you, basically. Like you don't get to do the same things all the other men, and all women get to do in society. That's basically what they're saying to these men, that they're like not enough, and which is not fair. It is absolutely a form of gendered oppression. It is sexist oppression. It is homophobic oppression. I guess biphobic too, but also ableist oppression. All of these things are,
Yeah.
um,
It is
and
all
it's
those things.
and we need to address it. Even
So
though
I think this segues into something which I think might be a nice way to kind of close things out. My new framework, right, for anti-feminism, which is the goal is to achieve humanism. Humanism without anti-feminism is half humanism. That which has been called humanism is merely half humanism, right? Or female supremacy. Those are all identical. So a prerequisite to being a humanist is the anti-feminism. Now, the way that we achieve that is we have to understand that if the prevalent version of humanism is just this retarded, half humanist, female supremacist garbage, well, we need to hold every single dominant ideology accountable for this because this shit's very elementary, right? It's an embarrassment. We can say with a lot of confidence that these dominant ideologies are fucking trash. And what we're noticing is that you can make the argument and point out that it's like unfair, right? That there's a discrepancy here, that it doesn't make sense. But the only way to truly make the point in a way that won't allow it to simply get repackaged or disrupted or to cause female supremacy to regrow itself is if all of the ideologies are criticized together. So we're going to do that right now. So they fall into three categories. The first is the three Jewish religions, Abrahamism. This represents just religious control over culture. And pretty much any religion that doesn't fall into Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they're largely almost completely non-problematic at all. I'll stand corrected if people can produce a really good example of why I need to expand it. But as far as I can tell, especially from an American perspective, it's the three Jewish religions.
what about Scientology?
What?
They're bad too.
I don't give a fuck about Scientology. Whatever. Fuck Scientology. Scientology, the Christians can own Scientology for all the fuck I care.
Yeah, they call it the Church of Scientology, so I guess that makes sense.
It's just goofy white people doing goofy white people stuff. And then, the second one is obviously feminism. And then, of course, we have the third one, which is, traditional conservatism, right? No, I'm sorry. It is archism or statism, right? So getting rid of the government by itself, right, would be sufficient to solve most of these issues. If these were subjected to natural market forces, we would already have everything we want and it'd be a done deal. So from the statist perspective, well, they're looking at things from this like soulless utilitarian perspective, right? So it doesn't matter to them that it's like not suiting this deontological standard for equality, because that's not really what it's about. They only value equality insofar as it connects to a different utilitarian goal. In this case, just pussy begging, right? So, and their conception of what a man should be satisfied with is based entirely on these gynocentric bigotries that they've never checked, right? Then with feminism, right, we have this capture of gendered issues where they exclusively define everything, in terms of, how do we only advocate for women, right? And they just found a way to cheat by definition into making the entire conversation just totally ignore the other half of the comparative claims they're making. And then in terms of the Jewish religions, well, it's basically just a way for natalists to pretend that there's something deeper and transcendental to their value system when, I'm sorry, but Schopenhauer's right. It's a Venus flytrap, right? This is something in nature that is a manipulation, and it's something that people should be careful with and guarded towards. So all three need to be criticized at once, because if you have this generic idea of complementarianism, right, now you have the tradcons, and we all know tradcons are fucking cancer. They're basically useless people. Now, I don't think they are useless. I think they're being useless people, and I think we can fix them. With feminism, right, they used to do the gender flip, right? They used to do it. I've noticed that's gotten a lot less popular over the last 10 years. And it's because every single fucking time you do a gender flip well, they embarrass themselves. They step on a fucking rake and they hit themselves in the head. Every time. They always try to do it in a stupid fucking fake way because they're retarded. And that's the only way for them to preserve their worldview. And then they think they're clever. And, they just need to understand, anti-feminists, sorry, but we're the real egalitarians. And you never were. And, they need to eat shit. They need to own it. They need to understand that if they're going to identify as a feminist, I'm going to say, wow, so you're a female supremacist cunt. Fuck you. I think men and boys are worthy of basic rights, and I think that women are adults, and we're going to hold you to that standard. So eat shit. And then, of course, when it comes to, the government, I kind of already went into that. Like a lot of these government standards, it's been captured by a ridiculous, retarded monopoly. And that's why, wow, the monopoly is doing a bad job. I can't even believe it. So that's kind of my tirade, basically. It's a lich. We got to destroy the Horcruxes all at once. And that's the vision of my channel right now. So as much as possible, I want to be a big tent and support anyone in their efforts to promote awareness of men's issues, to really support and to challenge people, who are not really displaying a level of care and compassion and empathy towards, I don't know, half the fucking human species, right? We can be a little bit bitchy. We can afford it. We've not quite indulged enough, I will suggest.
Well, for sure.
Like basically, we can do all these things, and that's my broad project. But of course, in my space here, the religions are I'm going to be savaging them because they're in my fucking way. And the traditionalism and the complementarianism, it's going to take a savaging because it's in my fucking way. And your cute little niche version of feminism, how you think you fixed it and have a fourth way version, yeah, you're in the fucking way, and I'm going to be saying mean things to you. So
yeah,
but yeah, this also ties into, you might appreciate, A Shield for Men had done a post about these popular copes within the manosphere, and he highlighted the artificial uterus. It's a crazy cope. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. It's only going to benefit rich men, right? It's just like,
the rich men deserve rice too, right?
oh, don't say that in front of our new ANCOM friends. Yeah, good.
I'm
That's one
gonna
of my
say it
favorite
because rich men are men.
observations Ayn Rand pointed out. Like, if you think that a person procuring wealth at some point, like, justifies your ability to just steal their shit or give them less rights, you don't believe in human rights. It's just incompatible. We either have human rights or we don't. And like our status of procuring objects shouldn't really have any impact on that.
No, it
People
shouldn't,
don't
because
like that. They don't like that because they've been fed a lot of propaganda about how all their problems are caused by the rich people. I'm sorry, but Elon Musk has really done very little to fuck up your life. Insofar as he has, it's because of his use of the government and his use of subsidies that he shouldn't have or whatever. But ultimately, it's really not the impact you're looking for. And of course, the obvious thing is that any new technology, of course, it's available to rich people first, but it's brand new cutting edge technology, right? It's such a ridiculous sort of a thing to complain about. Like, oh, you're going to invent a car? Well, only a fucking rich person could ever afford that, right? And we're all just going to keep renting horses forever. And it's like, no, oh, look at that. The cars are getting cheaper. Oh, look at that. We've created luxury industries and now you can work in those industries, right? Trickle down is supply side economics, right? That's a ridiculous straw man term that retards use.
But I do think that, like, when it comes to like futuristic technology, it's of course something one should support. But I do think that when it comes to, we should still mainly focus on the things that are accessible now. Because when I talked about the most recent issue when it comes to access to parenthood, those technologies are already in place, right? The only problem is funding, and also because of the legal barriers and all the.
Wait a minute, though. What's the
when I say funding? When I said funding for assisted reproduction for men who might need it.
Oh, I thought you meant artificial uterus.
No, but that's a future, which is something that we get in the future.
So I want to be clear about that, because when you say, "Oh, we already have technology, just needs money," it's like, no, that one's not there yet.
No, we don't have that one. That's my point, that we don't have that one. I was went online. We do have IVF and we do have surrogacy, and many men that we went over earlier do need these things, right? But the fact that they are so hard to utilize because of the law, that's the fucking problem, and that's the problem we need to address. And when I say subsidize it, I'm saying that, well, if we have a lot of things that women benefit from, that men can't benefit from, then that men have to subsidize. And many of these men that want kids are already subsidizing with their taxes, something like that, and their spouses too. Then it's just logical that they should have their reproduction subsidized too. And even looking at it from an economic perspective, when they create productive citizens, then that's actually going to take off the burden of society caring about them when they grow old. And it's also going to mean more productive people in society in the future. So even from a completely statist perspective, gay and disabled men need to have assisted reproduction.
Yeah, like the Wignat and alt-right people complaining about the birth rates, I mean,
exactly, that could fix it, but no, because we don't like if man is a disabled, because then he's not a provider.
Yeah, and it's because it's ironic, like,
because then he's not
their values in terms of traditionalism, right? Because when they look at women, they don't want women to do anything, right? Like, they just want women to stay out of their way, and then they can just be these object little princesses in little gilded cages, right? Like, I think the feminists are correct on some points, right? That this traditionalist view of them is insulting and ridiculous and does put them in a box. The problem is, they're not really manning up to it. They haven't really, taken they haven't left the shallow end, right, of it. They've kind of said, "Oh, I want to go out just in case," right? But there is something there, right? The Maslow's problem among women is something that truly is being caused by what you might call patriarchal traditionalism. So that's a W I'm not going to take away from the feminists. I'm not going to take away from that.
They don't extend it. If they were to say that, yeah, okay, but if women get to have all these things, shouldn't gay and disabled men get legal means to parenthood? And if you get subsidies for all the other things that are not productive that women do, then why can't those men get the same subsidies? It's not really that expensive for society to cough off if you're going to pay for a fucking military and for like women-only scholarships, for example, and abortions. Like,
well, and
it's
frankly,
completely illogical that
the
these things should
reason
not be
that
covered.
but the reason is because they're tradcons, right? So they believe in complementarianism, right? Which is just a way to, it's a thought terminating cliche that creates space for magical thinking. And in that magical thinking, like, no, of course we're going to give women special privileges, right? And it's essentially just an application of, naturalistic fallacy. And part of the issue, right, is that when you look at heterosexual use of technology to assist in reproductive endeavors, yeah, we're doing some fucking sci-fi shit, and it's at the point where it's irresponsible not to, right? If we don't want women to die in childbirth, and we don't want to create stillborn babies and shit like that, So then, of course, it's like, well, mechanically, what's happening, right, when you combine a sperm and an egg? The only difference in where you draw nature versus artifice is completely arbitrary, because humans are just animals. We're already
Exactly, I've always
using
been saying that.
productive technology and techniques, right? And there's literally no non-arbitrary place to draw that line. And you could make the argument that it's heterosexual couples that are creating these accidental children, whereas like a gay couple can't, right? Like, gay parenthood is like the most intentional fucking thing you could possibly do.
Mm-hmm.
And is that not kind of what's missing from family structures, is like the important fucking intention and the planning and being careful about things? So, it's not to say the gays have all their shit together. Obviously not. No one does. But there's another way of kind of looking at things. But yeah, there's this irony that you have these like fucking neo-Nazis that have these ridiculous, retarded delusions about complementarianism, and they got it from the Jews. They got it from the fucking Jews. You are controlled by your worst enemies.
Yeah, but everybody knows that he's not an idiot. But like, basically, what I want to say about this traditionalism is basically the saying that, oh, it's so patriarchal, it's so anti-male, it's so patriarchal, it's so misogynistic. Like, it means that if you're a guy that has a disability, or if your guy is gay, it basically tells you, do you have any access to get parenthood? It's like, they're like, no, you basically just die, is basically what they tell them, those men.
Oh yeah, and of course, if
They
you're
used to,
talking about
they
women,
used to like, just
right,
die.
that
That's
issue
what
is,
they say.
all the sensitivity in the world, right? To if a woman's infertile or having issues or something like that, or that maybe she loses the ability to have children and she didn't have any, right? And it's like this big sad thing, and it's like, for people who just get classed into that just callously, it's like, yeah, it's definitely just one of thousands of examples of the double standard and care and concern.
Because like, it's not logical, because people will say like, no, gay men, you don't need to have kids because same-sex couples kids, they don't do as well as straight couples on average. And I'm like saying that, okay. And then they have statistics, right? And in those statistics, they take kids of lesbian and gay couples, and then 80% of the kids come from lesbian couples. Those couples together, and they compare those couples to straight couples overall, and then use that disparity as a reason why specifically gay male couples
Well,
should
I
not
see.
get
Where so you're saying that the data they're using are like cases where it's what's the word for it? Where these marriages of convenience, right, between a gay man and a lesbian. That's what you're referring to.
No, I'm referring to specifically when it comes to gay, when they compare parents of same-sex parents or
Oh,
straight
you're just
parents.
complaining that gay couples and lesbian couples are in the same pool and averaged
Yeah,
together.
because the lesbian couples are
Well,
way
okay,
bigger.
no, I think this is bullshit though, because the big counter argument to a lot of those numbers is they say that like a lot of these progressives who are gathering the data, that there was selection bias, right? Because they'd have like rich upper class lesbian friends who would tell all their other lesbian friends, right? And they had a way of like, it would cluster in kind of like more upper class, more affluent couples, and obviously that skews the data. That's the argument that I've heard, and that if you control for that, then there is a suggestion that no, the gay parents are not necessarily doing as well as their straight counterparts.
Yeah, but the point of what I'm seeing with people who basically are trying to go against gay parents, they basically say that gay parents compared to straight parent don't do as well, right? And then the pool that they're looking at is over 80% lesbian and less than 20% gay men in that pool. And then they compare that average of all those couples to the average straight couple, right? And then because the average straight couple, right, do better than the average um,
Lesbian, basically.
lesbian couple, and they say it's same-sex couple because a small minority of those are men, right? But if you
Well,
want
wait
to,
a minute. Are you
no, wait,
contending then that the gay 20% have much better outcomes than the lesbian
yes,
counterparts?
they do, because if you divide them, they do actually have that.
That's insane, right? Because what I just talked about, if that's also true, that means that the lesbians are losing a rigged game.
Yes, they are.
So the lesbians are losing a rigged game, and then they're also dragging the gay men down. That's outrageous if true. I mean, I'm gonna have to maybe do a tiny bit of Googling because I'm still skeptical. I think that sounds completely outrageous, but it wouldn't be the most outrageous thing that we found.
right, but here's the crux of it, right? They are seeing that the comparison between lesbian couples that have small amount of gay couples in there, gay male couples, and then straight couple, right? And then they take that average disparity, and then they use that as a reason why specifically gay male couple should be prevented from having children by comparing the disparity between lesbian couples and straight couples. Do you see how dishonest they are?
Right. No, obviously it's retarded. Yeah.
Right,
I
and
mean,
they say, "Oh, it's
my
same because
theory is
they
that
don't
basically,
distinguish."
well, because I think that the outcomes, right, is that generally speaking, it's two parents do the best, and then it's single fathers. Although I'm not even sure if there's much of a discrepancy there. Like single fathers might even be doing about as well as their like two-parent household counterparts, right?
Yeah, he has
And
the
then of
opposite.
course you have then from and then obviously the absolute worst is single mother. And of course, that should be, like that should be just like game, set, and match. When it's like, okay, but if you're going to make a utilitarian argument, if you're doing better than the single mothers on average, I guess you're just going to have to shut the fuck up, right? Because you're not going to go after them.
No, exactly. But because here's the deal: if you compare single dads, straight couples, and gay male couples to single mothers and lesbians, the biggest difference is if a couple have a man, or if the parents
Mhm.
if one of the parents is a male, or if none of the parents is a male. That's the biggest distinction. It's the
Right. When we
presence of
talk
a
about
man that
issues
makes
of
the biggest distinction. On average.
fatherlessness, they mean that very explicitly, fatherlessness.
Yes, but they say, "Oh no, it's sexuality is the biggest distinguish," and then they only go after gay men having kids, not after lesbians because they can't, right? They only go after gay men, not go after single mothers because, well, they're twisting statistics that are in favor of gay men in order to, you know, uh, to like use excuse bigotry. They use being misandric and homophobic because those things intersect quite a lot. And then even if that was true, even if it was a huge difference between same-sex couples and gay and straight couples when it comes to outcomes of families, they never deny the fact that that single mothers is worse than a gay male couple. They never deny that fact. And a straight couple could end up a single mother household whenever the woman decides so. So even if
That's
straight
actually a
couples
good
were
point.
to perform better than gay couples, a straight couple can just become a single mother at any time. At any
Yeah,
time, the
these
woman.
traditional intact families. I mean, how many of them are ticking time bombs, right?
Yeah, it's just because if the woman says so,
Like
then
at least a third of them.
exactly right. So therefore, like, it's just trying to like be homophobic and sexist. It's just all it is, right? And what I've noticed in all these issues is that if people refuse to address intersectional men issues like we are doing, then none of the issues that affects any of the groups that we have talked about and will talk about is ever going to be fixed, because you cannot help any group of people that have men and women or boys and girls in it if you only focus on, if you ignore where the male part are specifically being affected in a way that the female part isn't. And you cannot care about men as a whole unless you care about men of every single demographic. You cannot only care about men in general, because then
Yeah.
you're leaving all the other men that are
Well, yeah, because
behind.
that's how
Because
people
the
look at it,
average
right? They
man has
look at
low
it as,
chances. The
yeah.
extraordinary man is even worse off than the average man.
So basically, what they're doing is they're saying, oh, here's the inequality problem, here's the problem of social justice. And they think that literally anything they do to benefit a categorically disadvantaged class, that it just is strictly a numerical like dent in that amount of vague social justice, and it all just kind of averages out. And of course, it's kind of like you have a meal, a balanced meal, and nobody wants to eat the vegetables, but then they say, oh, but we got all the calories in, and it's like, yeah, but you're ravenously fighting over all the meat, and all the vegetables are going, are going bad. Simple enough.
Yeah.
All right, I think we should kind of wrap it up here. Did we have any general closing thoughts?
We should because there are more intersectional men's issues. We should.
Oh yeah, we'll do another stream and we'll just keep going down the list.
Yes, until we finish with it, because this is very important, and there should be like a one video of each of this topic. It's just like so.
Honestly, what I'm thinking is, I might revive kind of like a structure to live streams, and if you want to be kind of like a rotating guest to kind of like bring one of these in, right, as like a little feature, kind of right, like as a segment, we go and kind of go over one of the next ones, in a piece of like a larger program. I think that would be kind of a fun.
Yeah. No, that's true, because we are worrying if we gotta get enough of these issues to talk about, and
yeah, but if it's only this, I think it might just be a little dry, right?
Yeah,
we want to do some fun stuff too. This is all good. I just think it should be balanced out with a little bit of brain rot.
Yeah, no, that is true, but I think we kind of got that in because we talked about a lot of bullshit as well, which was very funny.
Yeah, I cheat in the brain rot for sure.
Yes, that is noticeable.
It's happening if I'm
enjoyable.
Here. But yeah, so I think we touched on we got to like 4 total, but also just talking about the concept itself, a lot of big picture stuff, which is great for our first episode.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. Well, hey, I'm really happy that I saw the usual suspects hopping in the chat here. You guys are true G's. That I just don't do a stream. I show up like over a year and some change later, and then it's like, yeah, I'll hop in. Yeah. Like, that's fucking cool. And yeah, I think I do feel this is a different revival than my kind of half-assed attempts at revival in the past since I switched the channel name. So I think you can safely expect more on this channel. And that's about it. I'm going to be uploading a video. The video was intended to be uploaded before this one. I was going to upload it yesterday, but I just kept dragging my feet. But I do have the video and it is exported, so that'll be my next order of business, is to just plop it on up there. Just stick it up there. All right, I'll give you the closing word.
Yeah, well, my closing word is basically that this is like a very like important framework to me, and a very important issues to me, and I basically don't see it addressed enough because of the blind spot when people are either not looking at the male specific experiences of various groups, and also when people are only looking at the sex part and not at the various variation within the same sex. That is very important to address in order to help that sex. And that is something that I think one need to do. And one of the reasons why I'm very passionate about doing it is because very few people are doing it. So therefore I decided, well, if nobody's doing it, then you're gonna have to go and do it yourself, I guess.
Be the change. That's right. And that's a good point. If you're stepping into this space to discuss gendered issues and you want to promote people, thinking about them and everything like that, well, we are kind of stewards of the issues. So if we're not going to catch some of these nuances, that does mean nobody will. So it does behoove us, especially if we're kind of doubling back and recovering, or covering again, retreading some old ground. We got to be like magpies. There's some shiny stuff we missed. And any number of these pieces could be the key to really building something that turns it around.
Definitely, and it's totally needed, and that's why people shouldn't be afraid of using words because they have a bad connotation. Like, sorry, but like no ideology owns the English language, and to try to like say no, don't use that because these are the people that are bad using this word disingenuously and they're wrong, and I'm like, Yeah, but I'm not. So what's the problem?
Yes, every single one of us owns our own words, and they do in fact mean approximately what it is the declarant meant to say as they said the word.
Precisely.
All right. All right, I'm going to end the stream here. Thanks again to everybody for showing up. And thank you, JWille. Yeah, really, actually, I think we did a really good job not getting terribly distracted and covering these issues and bringing out a lot of nuance there. And also like showing how the structure that you presented at the beginning does fit into and apply this. It's going to be something that's going to take time to really, I think, for me, become like fluid, right? But I think as we approach things in this way, it'll be like, oh, that's a piling one, right? And I think there's a lot of power to be gained in that. So
yeah, because I had a hard time. I had a hard time to see like which one was piling or magnifying, because you notice many were piling.
Yeah, it's like, not a word that gets used very often. But do you feel that after this conversation, we kind of grasp it a little more clearly?
Yes, absolutely. I learned something too, because I basically, like, when I looked at it, I basically thought that they were all used magnifying. I'm like, what the fuck? Why is it all magnifying? But then you identify one as piling, and I was like, yeah, they kind of make sense. It is pretty piling.
You know, and it may be that some of them are kind of a little bit bleeding into each other a tiny bit, and there could be maybe another distinction that just precisely feng shui's it, but there might also not be. So, you know, that's always something that's open, I think, as well. All right, I'm going to call it right here before we turn it into a proper Minnesota goodbye.
Perfect.
Okay.